directed investments that's been purely driven by advancements in technology that has allowed retail investors like yourself and me to be able to have access to the market literally from pieces by investing both in local and international shares. And this has emerged with the ability for South African investors, as I said earlier on, to be able to download an app and depending on your provider of choice, be able to trade online and have access to investments both in SA and globally.
It's interesting that you say purely driven by access to technology, because I've been wondering how much of this is about trust. The fact that, now that you've got this app and, you've learned how to use it and there's a bit of confidence that's been given, by listening to the Money Show and reading certain articles, how much of it is actually a trust issue that I can do it myself because I don't trust a professional to do it?
That's a great question. I think I like the concept of trust, and it's funny you introduced that because from a finance perspective, whether it's banking or trading, that is the core of what we do in finance and investments, right? Firstly, when you're thinking of investments, trusting the platform provider is key, right? And you have to, number one, understand that the providers of these platforms are regulated by the FSCA. Second, though, trusting self, I think that's really where it really rubber hits the road, is that can you yourself log into a platform where, for example, in South Africa, there's over 300 listed shares in which you can trade, or once you go globally, you are looking at a universe of thousands, if not tens of thousands of shares in which you will have access to, and do you trust yourself in the ability to be able to pick and select the right stock for you to express your investment thesis? And I think that speaks to the bottom-up sort of work that needs to be done before one actually moves on into a self-directed investment platform, is that before you get there, what are you trying to achieve? And I think if you go through that granular sort of steps along the way, you will find that by the time you actually make the decision on what you want to buy or what you want to sell, you actually have a very robust view, an informed view of why you're doing and why you are trading and why you're investing in the asset that you are buying. I think there is a lot of work around the process that in that process onboards trust and the ability for you to defend your investment thesis if the groundwork is done accordingly.
And how clued up do you have to be? I mean, is it enough to have read a few articles, maybe listened to an interview or two, and downloaded an app and then started investing? Or is there an elementary level that you must hit in order to start being a capable investor, someone that can do their own investing?
Yeah, I think there's two pieces of the question. There's one, the actual functionality of investing online, being able to pull up, an app on your phone and click the buy and sell button on certain assets. That could be tricky the first time you do it because, it may be something that's new to you. And I think there's an element of sort of education and gaining confidence in being able to actually execute functionally the process of investments, both offshore and locally. But I think the real sort of challenge here is the work before, which I spoke to earlier on, is that once you know how to buy and sell, right, which is mainly the more functional piece, you then need to understand, what am I going to buy and sell? Am I going to buy a share that's on the JSE today? Am I going to buy the index? Am I going to buy an ETF? Or am I going to buy maybe an offshore listed asset? And I think that's where the real rubber hits the road in terms of, can anybody do it or not? I do feel, though, and the trend that we are seeing is that, in South Africa, for example, our investors are able to pick up the functionality quite quickly. Where the anxiety still resides is being able to synthesize all this information that's available to you and me today. When you open up the newspaper today, there's multiple headlines on multiple sort of financial thematics. With all that's happening around the world right now, how do you then make an informed decision on what to buy and what to sell? And I think that is where the anxiety comes in, and where the research piece and being able to understand the dynamics of, if X happens, in South Africa, what is the consequence to a certain sector in the market or a certain share? Or if something happens globally, what is the impact on certain indicators like inflation, like the oil price, and which sectors tend to benefit from that,
Yeah.
and which sectors then can suffer from that? And I think that's where the real confidence and then the trust in expressing your views really becomes the challenge.
So I suppose the next question then would be, what are the risks? I think many of us would rely on a financial professional like yourself to do it for us because we understand and we believe you know what you're doing. But for those of us who have decided to go the DIY route, what are some of the risks that are attached to this?
Yeah, I think it's once again speaks to what we and I spoke to earlier on around research. But before even that, I think when one thinks about self-directed investments, I think you really have to start with the question of why. Why am I doing this? Because that really informs your objective, right? Some of us are in the market to invest, to speculate, to generate additional income. Those are usually your speculative traders. Some of us are in the long haul. Some of us want to create long-term wealth, and therefore your trading strategy will be different whether you are a speculative investor or you are looking for more long-term sort of investment solutions, which may in theory be passive in nature. So understanding what your investment objectives look like is key. Second to that is also an understanding your risk tolerance and your risk appetite. We all have preferences in life, and you are not going to invest in something that is counter to your risk appetite. As much as sometimes where, especially with what you term as DIY trading, we may fall to the trap of some of the headlines that may pop through our screens, and you may think, oh, maybe I should unwind this ETF because I see that there's a certain sector like semiconductors, for example, is quite topical. But in that moment, you are actually deviating away from your strategy and your long-term objectives, and you are switching strategies during your investment process. So I think one of the risks that we have picked up, from self-directed investment sort of platforms is one, being able to be aligned to your investment objectives and being true to those principles throughout, because the market will have noise. The market at some days will be up or down. Certain sectors may benefit from certain, tailwinds or headwinds. But being able to stay true to investment thesis allows you to realize your investment objectives in the long term. So I think, doing this yourself, that's probably the main underlying sort of a risk is being able to stay true to your investment thesis and your risk appetite.
And I suppose the next logical question then, and it's actually a question on our WhatsApp line, how does one start? So is there some sort of a checklist, that I have to make for myself if I want to be successful in this DIY investing?
Yeah, look, starting is basically one. There are so many platforms available. So, walking you through the actual sort of steps would be you have to have a platform in which you can express your views first of all. And obviously, the company that I work for, Investec, we have a platform called Clarity in which you can express those views. But once you have a platform of choice that you have identified that allows you and enables you to express your views, you are then, I think you need to first say to yourself, why am I doing this? One, your investment thesis and your objectives, your risk appetite, and then being able to get closer to the market. Proximity to market news and market flow and market knowledge will bridge that gap. Because I think with all these barriers to entry having been sort of removed by technology, being able to trade anything on the JSE, being able to trade anything globally these days, any asset class, whether it's a unmargined basis, the real last mile in terms of where the gap lies and how one starts is actually acquiring the knowledge around what drives stock price performance. And in a view or in a position where one maybe does not have the immediate knowledge of which stocks or shares or sectors to focus on, depending on your risk appetite or certain times of the economy, the basic place to start would be, for example, an ETF. An ETF is usually a fund that is put together that has a number of shares at a certain weighting, and in nature is diversified and therefore reduces the risk, especially for someone who's new to the market. But I would advise that you will seek maybe additional advice if you are not one that is quite market inclined to begin with.
And then, Philip, I must ask, we're about to have a conversation, a masterclass on AI and music. But I must ask you about using AI to understand markets and assets. Is that something you recommend?
Oh, yes, I would. I mean, there are times where, for example, you use some of the AI platforms to give you a market summary, end of day summary, or a pre-market open summary. AI is a great enabler, especially to the points I made earlier on around research, around market dynamics, around what informs price movements and price action, because that is where opportunity lies. Where market moves, like we are seeing on days like today and yesterday, that's where opportunity resides. And one can really exploit AI to allow you and enable you to get closer to market research, market information, which bridges that gap around the research piece.
Philip Dube, let's leave it there. Thank you so much for your time. He is the head of equity finance at Investec.
Thank you so much, Khomotso.
This is EWN.
Good afternoon, I'm Bali Dlamini. The veracity of evidence related to the 2020 Phala robbery is under scrutiny in the Western Cape High Court today. President Cyril Ramaphosa's legal counsel has told the court Ramaphosa acted in good faith at all times when it came to light that the US dollars had been stolen. His lawyers have argued that the independent panel that suggested Ramaphosa may have acted in bad faith did not sufficiently weigh up the information put before it. Ramaphosa is asking the court to review and set aside the report which has given rise to the impeachment inquiry against him. Lindsay Dentlinger reports.
Advocate Wim Trengove has argued that the independent panel appointed by Parliament in 2022 misinterpreted the National Assembly's rules on impeachment. He has told the court the panel simply accepted the evidence put before it as sufficient to determine that President Ramaphosa may have a case of misconduct to answer to.
The panel should have asked itself not only whether there is sufficient evidence, but whether there is sufficient evidence that the President acted willfully and in bad faith.
Trengove says Ramaphosa's version of events was not weighed up against the unsubstantiated allegations made by former spy boss Arthur Fraser, who blew the lid on the Phala saga.
They recited lots of things, but they didn't weigh up anything. They simply concluded there are these allegations against the President, and therefore there's a prima facie case.
The hearing continues. Lindsay Dentlinger, Eyewitness News, Western Cape High Court.
Images of alleged Big Five cartel members have been shared at the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry today, where retired Hawks head General Godfrey Lebeya has been on the stand today. Lebeya is accused of interfering in the police's operation to arrest alleged crime boss Katiso KT Molefe in 2024. He claims he sent Hawks officers to verify the operation following an alert by a civilian known as Malcolm X. WhatsApp messages between the pair reveal Malcolm X thanked Lebeya for sending the officers and further sent appreciation on behalf of a male he named as King Nyambose. Chairperson Buiseli Madlanga suggested the messages inferred collusion.
So with all of that in mind, why did you not ask him, who's this Nyambose, and what on earth is he thanking me for?
Yeah, at that stage, it did not come to me that I should question him about who this Nyambose is.
You were an experienced police general. An experienced police general.
Two men convicted for the murder of a Gauteng couple 4 years ago have been sentenced to life in prison in the Pretoria High Court. Rasinkuna and former police officer Jacob Chego lured Lucky and Sabeliwe Mahawusha under false pretenses to Etwata in the East Rand in 2022. Police say Nkuna conspired with Chego to kill the couple so that he could get their car, which had been reported as stolen from a police facility in Mpumalanga. Police spokesperson Athlenda Mate.
While in jail, before he comes out on parole, he buys a vehicle for his then girlfriend, while months later they are driving along with the girlfriend at a mall. When they come out of the mall, they realize, well, this car's surrounded by, a whole lot of police officers. They then realize it seems as though this car was a stolen vehicle.
Mate says Nkuna offered to drive the couple to help them retrieve their vehicle from Mpumalanga. The wife was pregnant at the time of the attack, while their two children, aged 1 and 8 years old, witnessed their parents being shot and killed.
On their way to Mpumalanga, Rasi takes out a gun, obviously directs Lucky to drive on a gravel road. He then shoots them in front of their 8-year-old boy and their 1-year-old child.
Parliament's Joint Standing Committee on Defence has elected a new co-chairperson following the sudden removal of Malusi Gigaba from that position. His sudden removal has led to a fallout, with members from the committee clashing over the ANC's failure to provide reasons for his axing. Gigaba has been replaced by ANC MP Mzimasi Hala. Babalondenze has more.
ANC MP Malusi Gigaba was elected co-chairperson of the Joint Standing Committee on Defence from the National Assembly component not long after the 2024 elections. While the ANC provided no reasons for his removal today, the EFF had earlier called for him to step down as he faces formal charges of corruption in relation to a Transnet contract. Co-chairperson Piroane Phala announced his removal.
We must just explain that our co-chair, Dr. Gigaba, has been relieved from his responsibilities.
But committee member Emma Powell questioned how the vacancy arose and whether it was procedural.
Has a formal letter of resignation from the Honourable Gigaba been received by this committee? Secondly, was there an ATC announcing the vacancy of the chairperson?
ANC MP Wendy Plaatjes says the ANC doesn't owe an explanation.
Why is she so interested to ask about Honourable Gigaba? It's party matter, finish and clear.
Babalondense, Eyewitness News.
And Turkish officials are still searching for 10 missing crew members from a ship which sank in the Marmara Sea. This after a cargo ship collided with a second vessel near Istanbul. The cargo ship went down in waters that were approximately 900 meters deep, with 14 vessels and a helicopter involved in search and rescue efforts. The cause of the collision was not immediately clear, but experts believe it was likely human error. The incident took place 3 days after a deadly ferry accident off northern Cyprus in which 8 Turkish nationals died. Gold is trading at $4,312.81 an ounce. The rand is at 16.13 to the dollar, 21.82 to the pound, 18.71 to the euro, and Brent crude oil is at $94.73 a barrel.
In Edenville, heading towards Bedfordview, there's bumper-to-bumper traffic on the N3 southbound between Modderfontein Road and the Gilulis interchange. If you are heading towards Alex Midrand, that's leaving the Germiston Bedfordview area. There's also huge delays. This is on the N3 northbound between Linksfield Road and London Road due to an earlier accident. In Waterkloof, Pretoria, slow-moving traffic N1 north from the R21 Flying Saucer interchange to Garsfontein Road.
It's a fine afternoon in Gauteng today. Temperatures have peaked at highs of between 27 and 29 degrees. The top story in EWN, the veracity of evidence related to the 2020 Phala riot is under scrutiny in the Western Cape High Court today.
EWN, in touch, in tune and independent. For the latest, visit ewn.co.za or download the EWN app.
702.
Live
on the Prime Media Plus app.
DSTV channel 856.
92.7
and 106 FM. Let's walk the talk.
Welcome back. It is 7:02 afternoons with me, Khomatsa Modise. I'm in for Relebogile Mabotja this afternoon with you until 3 p.m. It is 8 minutes past 2. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you missed the first hour of the show, please go onto the Prime Media Plus app or our YouTube page. You should be able to listen back to the conversations that we've just had. We're about to enter into an interesting conversation. It's our masterclass because it is a Wednesday. And today we talk about music, AI, and the copyright battle. Who owns the sound? My guests are experts in the space. We've got Nick Matsukis, who is CEO and founder of the Academy of Sound Engineering, and Colin Dlamini joins me in studio. He's the executive director at Creative Synergy. He's also a big advocate for the rights of creatives, and he's with me this afternoon. He's going to be giving us a lot of insight around the rights when it comes to AI music and reform in that space. We're taking your calls and your WhatsApps. The number to dial is 011 883 0702. Send me a WhatsApp on 072 702 1702. If you'd rather get in touch with me on X, my handle is at Mozo_Mudise.
702
Masterclass.
It is the masterclass this afternoon, and artificial intelligence is changing the way music is created, produced, and consumed. But it's also forcing the industry to ask some difficult but important questions around music ownership. Who owns the music when AI is involved? It's a question that we're hearing a lot with more AI-generated music trending, more AI-generated music being listened to, being consumed, and being made. And so for that conversation, my guests are Nick Matsukis, the CEO and founder of the Academy of Sound Engineering, and Colin Dlamini, the executive director at Creative Synergy. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining us, Nick.
Good afternoon, Komotso, and good afternoon, 702.
Good afternoon. And Colin, of course, is in studio. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Komotso. Good afternoon to 702 Landers and to Nick.
It's an important question.
Hello, Colin.
It's an important question that that gets asked quite a bit, and I haven't found the answer, Colin. And I wonder if there is actually an answer, a definitive answer around who owns the music. I'm sure you've heard this question a lot.
Yes, no, certainly. The simple answer to that is the one who makes the music owns the music. It's the rights holder, the one who holds the rights, the copyright protected works. Those are the people that own the music. And I don't think there should be any confusion to that, just because there's technological advancements, and we've gone through waves of technological advancements from the days when there was MP3s, and there was a big surge on piracy, and to the days now where there is AI, which is what the music industry is currently grappling with. But the answer still remains: the one who owns the music is the one who went into the studio and made the music and protected their copyright. If you don't protect your copyright, that's when then you'll be in trouble.
And it's interesting that you mention issues around piracy, Colin. Nick, is it fair or correct to be mentioning AI-generated music together with the likes of piracy? You know, I've heard this correlation or the link being made quite a bit in recent times with the number of artists that have been making waves in South Africa. Is it fair to be making that correlation or mentioning them in the same sentence?
Oh, absolutely, Komotso, I have to say. And just adding on to what Colin has said there, he's 100% correct. I don't want to give your listeners a copyright lecture here, but at the end of the day, what AI is doing is it's going into human-made works that it is not scraping, it has already scraped in most cases, whether it's Anthropic or Uno or Studio, and or Suno or Udio, and it's learning from them. And then it's creating out at the prompter's prompt, something that a lot of people think is new, quote unquote, but is not. In fact, it's actually adaptations of all the human-made works that were scraped. So yes, it's absolutely appropriate to be using the terms piracy and AI in the same breath, because what AI platforms are doing, and this is the result of all the lawsuits that are now happening, and there's another huge multi-billion-dollar lawsuit that's just been launched last week against Anthropic. All these lawsuits are saying the same thing, that AI is using human-made works without permission, and therefore it's in infringement of copyright. It is the latest form of piracy. It's just a very much more modern tool than, say, the turn of the century piracy, which was Napster, LimeWire, Grokster, Streamcast, all those torrenting sites. This is just the new way in which music is being pirated. So yes, the answer to your question is absolutely, it is piracy, and therefore they need to be licensed and royalties must be paid.
We're going to get into the licensing conversation in just a bit, but You mentioned an important word around permission, Nick. How does this differ from other adaptations that we've seen in the past? The use of music, repurposing, readapting it, turning a house song or what was an R&B song into a house song is nothing new. We've heard it countless times. The use of lyrics that had been in another song being used in another song has happened all the time. So how does this differ from the adaptations of music that we'd previously seen and heard?
Well, I'm so glad you've asked that question, because it's a very smart and intelligent question from Watson. And the answer is there's no difference, really. To use an old industry example, many of your listeners, I know he's not the flavor of the month, most certainly not, but it's a good example to use. When Diddy sampled Sting's Every Breath You Take, and turned it into his song, which was called I'll Be Missing You. And it was just a guitar line, really, but a very well-known guitar line that was written by the Police. And Diddy went ahead and used it to create his version without permission. And we all know the story. It was all over the news that while Sting was lying in bed at night sleeping, he was earning $5,000 a night off Diddy, who had been in infringement, and Sting's publisher went all over it. Well, it wasn't quite $5,000 a night. It was probably between $1,000 and $3,000, depending on the time. But yes, that's exactly what it was. It was an adaptation. And AI is doing nothing more than creating adaptations of all the human-made works that it scrapes. The only difference is that there can be dozens, hundreds, or even thousands of people who have been infringed, which makes the matter more complicated, of course. But it is nonetheless simply an adaptation of previously human-made work. There's actually no such thing as completely AI generative work, which is a term that's being bandied about.
Which is something I actually wanted to ask you about, Colin. That is every single AI-generated song an adaptation of music that already exists? Can we say that definitively? Or is there AI music out there that has made use of music, maybe the instruments, but not necessarily adapting set music that's been composed into a new AI song?
I really doubt there is music that is produced by AI that is not adapted from music that is made by human beings, because the very essence of what AI is, it's machine learning. It harvests intellectual property of human beings, of creatives. And what we've been hearing from a lot of these big tech companies that have been claiming that AI is not really producing music or an adaptation of music. It's simply just using certain data sets and certain patterns. That is not correct. It is using music, and they should seek permission. That is the bottom line. And they should, if really we are a responsible society that respects creativity, we should have these big tech companies coming to the table to negotiate with the people that own the rights for the music. And they should pay what's fair to them and remunerate them for it. Because we cannot have a situation where it's skewed only towards the users and the big tech companies. We must also make sure that the creatives benefit out of their works. So that is why we have collecting societies. If a piece of music that is produced by AI has harvested music from 5 different artists, those artists should be compensated for that piece of music, because then who's going to benefit from that economic value that is going to be generated from that music? It's the big tech companies.
Now, I know, Colin and Nick, you exist in this space and you guys are privy to the conversations that are happening. And so, for the benefit of our listeners, I really want you to take us into the arguments that are being made in the space. And maybe I'll give you a little difficult task, Colin, to give us the arguments that are being made for the use of AI music, because I know that there are arguments there. And Nick will then come to you, and I think this will be easier for you to give us arguments that are being made against the use of AI music. So Colin, let's start with you. What are some of the pro-AI arguments that are being made in this space?
So Khumut, there's a recent article that I saw where Google was saying last month, actually in June, where they said AI training is fair use and copyright should be policed on outputs and not inputs. That is a statement made by Google that they don't consider AI training and machine learning as, they see it as fair use. And fair use means free use. That's what it means. And currently in South Africa, we have a copyright amendment bill that has gone all the way to the Constitutional Court. And the Constitutional Court has declared some of the sections to be unconstitutional. And the issue of fair use has been at the heart of the debate between the users of copyright-protected material and those that make the copyright-protected material. And that's where the tension is. So we need to strike that balance. And it's really unfair to expect creatives to earn a living if they are not being compensated for their works. So free use, fair use is something that the one section has been against, which is the rights holders. And those that for the big tech companies, they are promoting fair use so that they can be able to get all their hands on this copyright protected material, generate economic value out of it, and avoid compensating those that own the copyright protected material. That is really the crux of it.
And Nick, the arguments that are being made against, I think we've already come into some of those.
Well, I'm so glad that Colin has raised that term fair use, because it's more appropriate to discuss it now than ever before. You know, at the time that the department, the various government departments involved, DTIC in this case, started legislating the Copyright Amendment Bill and introducing this notion of fair use, or trying to introduce it into our law, there was nothing like AI that existed. There was simply, big tech institutions like Colin has referred to, big corporate giants who really want to use copyrights willy-nilly without permission, without having to seek permission. And fair use, which is this American concept and a very open-ended and vague one, entitles them to do that and places the onus on the copyright owner to prove that the use is not fair. Now, really, folks, who's got money to go and sue the likes of Google and YouTube and Amazon and Microsoft and so on? Clearly, this is not something that we want in our law, but especially now that AI has become a thing. And I think the legislature needs to bear that in mind. Hopefully the Copyright Amendment Bill, and most certainly the fair use provision, which it seeks to introduce, will not be brought into our law. But even in territories where it is law and where it is applicable, courts are finding throughout the world that AI's use of copyrighted music is not fair use, which is very good news. There are arguments happening, and those arguments should never have happened. It really shouldn't have got that far in court in the first place, just like Napster should not have been able to use fair use to try and legitimize what they were doing. Same thing is happening here. We don't even want to have that debate. We don't want to even have those court cases in South Africa, where we have to dig into our pockets and prove that this is not fair use. It's not fair, but we don't need to prove that. The bottom line is that if fair use is introduced into our law, AI will dig their heels in and they'll say, well, South Africa is a beacon for laxer copyright, and so let's go there and use their copyrights. This is not what we want. As Colin has correctly pointed out, the rights owners whose music was scraped deserve to be paid, and they deserve to be paid what's called a mechanical royalty, which is the reproduction royalty, because their music has been reproduced and adapted. So I'm not really answering the question, is AI good or bad? What I'm saying is that AI must pay up for the right to use copyrighted works, and fair use is not an excuse for them to say, no, we don't have to pay.
I appreciate you saying that, because I think the next question really would be, we are already here. There is no way to stop the production of music. But what would using AI responsibly in this space look like? And I think that's where the conversation has now shifted. I see you agreeing, Colin.
Yeah, I totally agree. You can't stop this train. It's here now. And we are for technology. We are not against technology. And we should set the record straight. But the answer is in licensing. AI companies, big tech companies, they should license this music and pay what's fair to them. They must pay those mechanical royalties that are due to the artists. And we need also transparency around that. That is very important, because if they're just going to, we're going to have a market which is flooded with AI-produced works, but there is no transparency on how much is being paid, that is a problem. And you then create a situation where you will gradually find that artists are not being compensated what is fair and what is due to them. So it's very critical that we establish a very robust licensing framework for AI-produced music.
And I hear you agreeing there, Nick. I mean, I'm reading one of your pieces that you've written, and you say the concern is that these licensing deals may evolve to prioritize corporate interests over fair creator-first royalty structures. What is this, licensing framework that you are suggesting for this space?
Yeah, I'm so glad you've asked that. In my opinion, this licensing framework that Colin has referred to needs to exist at CMO level, not at rights holder level. Now, CMO stands for Collective Management Organization. You guys have no doubt heard of SAMRO and Capasso and SAMPRA and RISA Audiovisual. These are organizations that license music usage collectively. And when it comes to reproductions, the two licensing bodies in South Africa are Capasso for the underlying musical work, the composition, and RISA Audiovisual for the sound recording itself. Now, because reproductions are happening here, licensing has to happen, royalties must be charged, and the AI platforms and their users must pay those royalties, which must then go through to the members of Capasso and RISA Audiovisual. That's all very well and good. But what is happening in America with the dozens and dozens and dozens of lawsuits that rights holders have brought against the AI platforms, particularly Suno and Udio, is that we've come to the point where the lawsuits are now being settled, and Suno and Udio are saying, and for that matter, Anthropic as well, are saying, okay, Mr. Rights Holder, Mr. Record Label, what kind of money do you want? And at this point, the record labels are turning around and saying to the AI platforms exactly what they said to Spotify when Spotify was the next big thing, which was as follows: well, give us a cut in your business. Please give us a stake, equity in your AI platforms. Now, that is a red flag to me, and a big red flag, because what we don't want is major rights holders, the record labels in particular, and the major publishers, starting to use their own AI-generated works now, which are not generated by AI at all. They're all adaptations, and using those to compete against their human-made composers, because that would cause more chaos for the human composers and performers. We don't want that. We want these negotiations to happen at CMO level, because Capasso and RISA Audiovisual and the other, and SAMPRA and SAMRO, the other CMOs, don't have a vested interest here. They don't own copyrights. They're not in the business of creating income from copyrights. They're in the business of licensing and getting that money in and paying it over to their members. So that is why it's very important that these negotiations and this licensing happens at CMO level and not at rights holder level, as seems to be happening in America right now. This has been reinforced in Germany, for example, where GEMA, the rights organization in Germany, have sued both Anthropic and Suno and OpenAI, and they've taken them to court and they've won. And that's the right way, because now what's happening is negotiation with them at a broader industry level, and there's no talk about GEMA taking a cut in Suno. That's far from on the table.
Yeah.
And that's where I think we want this to go.
We're having a conversation around AI, music, and copyright. Who owns the sound? And my guests this afternoon are experts in this space and advocates for the rights of creatives. We are going to be continuing with the conversation. I want to invite you to give us a call on 011-883-0702 if you have any questions about the production of music with AI, or send me a WhatsApp at 072-702-1702. When we come back, we speak about how these developments in law in other countries are influencing the South African landscape and what we can learn from that as well. But what does the law in South Africa currently look like? I mean, I think we can all agree that there is a need for reform. There is a need for a conversation around, our copyright laws being revisited, reworded. What does that look like? What does the process even look like? And how do we get it started? We're going to be having that conversation immediately after the news headlines. Mbali Dlamini is standing by with the headlines. Good afternoon.
Thanks, Khomoto. Good afternoon. The Western Cape High Court has heard that it would have been absurd to expect President Cyril Ramaphosa to report the burglary on his Palapala farm in 2020 to the police in person. His legal counsel, Wim Trengrove, contends that by reporting the crime to the head of the Presidential Protection Service, Wally Rhoda, Ramaphosa did not act in bad faith. Ramaphosa is challenging a parliamentary report that considered the events linked to the theft of US dollars from his farm and which suggests there's sufficient evidence for him to face impeachment over his conduct. More than 140,000 candidates from various political parties have submitted their nominations to contest the upcoming local government elections. The candidates will be competing for around only 10,500 seats, which are up for grabs in municipal councils across the country. Parties and independent candidates had until last week to submit their candidate lists as well as nominations for the polls. And Parliament's Joint Standing Committee on Defence has elected a new co-chairperson following the sudden removal of Malusi Gigaba from that position. His sudden removal has led to a fallout with members from the committee clashing over the ANC's failure to provide reasons for his axing. Well, those are the headlines. This EWN and more at 3 or as it happens.
EWN Traffic.
Well, at this stage, if you're traveling through Edenvale heading towards Bedford View, slow-moving traffic, N3 southbound. This is between Morafontein Road and the Kilulis interchange due to an earlier accident. In the opposite direction, this time heading towards Midrand in the Alex area. Also, accident seen N3 northbound near London Road, causing heavy delays from Morafontein Road. Look out for those faulty traffic lights in Marlborough Drive and Old Pretoria Road. Traffic lights still not working in four ways at Monte Casino Boulevard and Witkoppen. If you come across any other traffic issues, kindly WhatsApp us on 072-702-1702.
There's more EWN on air, online, and on the EWN app.
Mr. Dacre Sang the Blues is a theatrical adaptation of the 2025 Dalro Kantamba Merit award-winning fictional short story by Gyonzo Gwinika. This play with music offers a moving reflection on the loss of an artist with themes of grief, family, friendship, and love. Mr. Dacre Sang the Blues runs at the Market Theatre from the 13th of September to the 4th of October. The music will haunt you. The story will stay with you. Tickets are available at webtickets or markettheatre.co.za.
I want us to play the long game. I know it's not easy, but I need a year to get some interest back.
Give your money room to grow with up to 7.6% interest. Open a 12-month Nedbank electronic fixed deposit account on the Money app and stand a chance to win an all-expenses-paid VIP Nedbank Golf Challenge experience for 2. Go to nedbank.co.za. See money differently. Nedbank. We're licensed FSP and registered credit provider. T's and C's apply.
Strong communities are built on a strong local government. Every day, municipalities work to deliver the essential services that improve lives and support thriving communities across South Africa. As the voice of local government, SALGA represents, supports, and empowers municipalities to build capable institutions, promote good governance, and advance effective service delivery. SALGA, inspiring service delivery.
To walk the talk is to turn words into meaningful actions. And it's what we at 702 are committed to doing every day. We're also committed to following the rules set out by the Broadcasting Complaints Commission's Code of Conduct. To give you balanced programming, fair comment, and accurate news. But if we stumble along the way and you feel we're not living up to the code, let us know on comment@702.co.za. And if after that you're still not happy, you can direct your complaint in writing to the Broadcasting Complaints Commission, PO Box 412365, Craig Hall 2024. For more, visit bccsa.co.za.
Coming up
on 702 Drive with John Perlman.
From 3 to 6, the 702 Drive with John Perlman, and he's in studio this afternoon to tell us what's coming up on the show. Dr. John, good afternoon.
Yeah, very good afternoon to Khomotso, and good afternoon to all of our listeners down in the courts in the Western Cape. The beginnings of the legal matter in which President Cyril Ramaphosa is looking to have the previous investigation into Phala Phala conducted under the auspices of Parliament set aside. Court running until 4 o'clock. After that, we'll hear from Lindsay Dentlinger with the very latest on the argument back and forth. We will be talking to the IEC. All the candidate lists are now in. What do we know about how many people are keen to be local government councillors? You'd sometimes have to wonder why, given the state of local government, why anyone would want to get involved. But I suppose that answers its own question. They probably want to get involved, they say, to fix things up. Anyway, the IEC are with us after 5 o'clock. The court case involving Vusimuzi Katmatlala, very interesting today. We'll get details on that. And Basic Education Minister Siviwe Gwachube will be joining us after 4. They've been investigating issues around textbook procurement. She's also been putting down some really quite scary numbers about how much money is needed to physically fix up our schools. She's with us at 4:10.
All right, that is a 702 afternoon drive with John Perlman between 3 and 6 p.m.
702
Masterclass.
It's the Masterclass right here on 702 Afternoons. My name is Khomotso Modise. I'm in for Relebogile Mabotja this afternoon. Thank you so much for tuning in. We're speaking about AI music and the copyright battle. What does the South African landscape look like? And who owns the sound? My guest this afternoon is Nick Matsukis, who is the CEO and founder of the Academy of Sound Engineering. He's written quite a bit about this. And we've got Colin Dlamini, Executive Director at Creative Synergy, who's also penned his thoughts on this quite a bit. He's also an advocate for the rights of creatives, and they are joining us this afternoon. Colin, you made mention a little earlier about big tech being held accountable and, the responsibility that is attached to them. However, in South Africa, we've recently had an incident with, an artist who is understood to be using AI music from his back room, it seems. And I've been wondering, what's the responsibility when it comes to him or any other artist who's sitting at home on their computer, on their laptop? They make this amazing music that everyone loves. Are they completely absolved, or is there an element or some responsibility when it comes to them as well?
I'm actually glad, Khomotso, that incident happened because it has allowed us as South Africans to start to have this very same conversation we're having today, which is a very important conversation. We cannot just brush it under the carpet. It's really critical for us to examine who bears the responsibility and the onus to ensure that copyright protected works and intellectual property of creatives is respected and they're compensated appropriately. So in this case, yes, that artist is definitely, he's got the responsibility to ensure that he discloses who are those artists, other artists that he adapted his music from, and also the platform that actually distributes his works. They also have a responsibility to ensure that they have systems in place that are able to detect which music is AI produced music. And then also in this equation, we shouldn't forget that government also bears a huge responsibility to ensure that the legal framework it does protect intellectual property of rights holders, because if we don't have a legal framework that protects IP, then South Africa will not be seen as an attractive investment destination for creative works. If I'm sitting in Hollywood and I want to produce a film in South Africa, and I see that South Africa has weak intellectual property laws, I will not come to South Africa, because whatever I'll produce in South Africa, I know it will not be sufficiently protected, and my works can be susceptible to piracy and all other forms of illegal usage. So it's very important that we have strong IP laws, and it's proven all over the world. Countries which have strong IP laws, they're able to attract large amounts of investments.
And you speak about the platforms. I want to bring you in here, Nick, because during that incident, there was conversation around whether the platforms should remove his music. And I think at some point the music had been removed and then uploaded. What's the responsibility of the platforms currently as things stand? And how do they approach AI-generated music? Because we do know a lot of AI-generated music does live on those platforms. Does the current legislation or laws around AI-generated music compel them to declare to the audiences as well?
Well, we've got a perfectly adequate Copyright Act, but it was written in 1978. It's very old now. And it obviously needs to be updated, not only in respect of AI, but also in respect of streaming, which it doesn't even recognize at this point. So yes, our copyright laws need to be updated, no doubt about that. And this is where government comes in. We'd like them to do it in an efficacious manner, and we'd like them to pass regulations which are specifically couched around AI and ensure that the AI platforms have certain responsibilities. Now, what should those responsibilities be? Well, first of all, detection of AI-generated work or AI-created work, shall we say, or adapted work, detection of it. Secondly, attribution of the true owners whose works have been scraped in the creation of the work. And thirdly, labeling that it is AI-generated work. And then, of course, finally, payment for the generation or the download. Now, already the AI companies are starting to limit downloads, and they're starting to say you can only do 10 a month or 20 a month and so on. And this is a direct result of the lawsuits that have happened. But one guiding light here in terms of the platforms is Deezer. And they've actually turned out to be a very transparent and good positive player with regard to the AI space. Now, I'm not saying that they're necessarily just driven by moral and ethical considerations, but they are certainly doing the right thing. Because Deezer discovered not so long ago that up to 80% of the uploads to their site were AI generated. Now, this was a problem, of course, for their human artists who were now competing with this landslide of digital garbage, quite frankly, that was being uploaded to Deezer. But it was also a problem in another respect, because Deezer discovered very soon after this that up to 90% of what was being streamed in respect of those AI-generated works was fraudulent. They were fraudulent streams. In other words, they were not humans listening to those streams. They were bots that had been set up by the very people who were uploading that AI-generated work in order to acquire royalties that were not theirs. So that's fraud, plain and simple. So on the platform side, we want that kind of responsibility from the Spotifys and in particular the YouTubes of the world. We want them to take a similar responsibility and say, no, this is not okay on our site. And we expect you to tell us when it's AI generated, and we're going to label it for you. And these have gone so far now as to develop technology that actually tracks whether it's got any AI generated content in it. So that's what we want to see. It can be done. It is being done by Deezer. It already is happening throughout the world. So there's no reason why the other sites can't follow suit. But the second thing is that there's also a fraud happening with regard to the artists and the uploaders themselves. And I think you alluded to this earlier, Komotso, and Colin did, which is that you're kind of pretending when you upload an AI-generated work, you're kind of pretending, that it's yours, which it's not. Then you're pretending that it is human-made, which it is in a sense, but it's adaptations of human-made work, so it's not a human-written work. But also you're breaching certain other rights in law, not just copyright in respect of the underlying compositions that are being used and also the sound recordings that were scraped, but also breach of personality rights when you are implying or claiming that, I don't know, that this is Drake, for example, which happened to him. There was an uploader called Ghostwriter who uploaded a track and claimed that it was by Drake and Tupac, who was well deceased by then. But Drake didn't like this very much, even though he himself had created an AI-generated work earlier on, which was a parody of one of his competitors. Mm-hmm. But the point is that you cannot claim that it's somebody that it's not just because it was created by AI. And then, I mean, in law, that's called passing off. Yeah. You can't deceive the public into thinking that it's something that it's not. And also, you're breaching the original artist's personality rights, which is another IP right. You can't do that. So in all three respects, AI is breaching the law. And Deezer's doing the right thing. I'd like the other platforms to follow suit.
We are speaking AI and music and copyright. Who owns the sound? I do see some of your WhatsApps coming in. In fact, let's take one.
All right, just a quick one. What is the difference between an AI adaptation and a remix? And do remixes pay charges, levies?
Do you want to take that, Colin?
Look, we've had remixes way before AI was even a thing. So remix doesn't necessarily mean it's you've breached someone's copyright and you've infringed someone's copyright. You can use the same music and just change something here or two in terms of the instruments and etc. But we've always had remixes since the 80s and 90s. It doesn't necessarily correlate to AI-produced works.
Okay, all right. And I do think we had that conversation a bit earlier on. Nick, speak to me about the private copy levy. It's something that you've spoken about before.
Okay. If I can just add to what Colin has said about remixes.
Yeah.
Actually, a remix is an adaptation. It is. It's an adaptation of the underlying composition, and it's also an adaptation of the sound recording that you are now remixing. So it is an adaptation, and technically you've got to get two permissions to do that, the owner of the underlying work and the owner of the sound recording as well. And there's become an ethos in South Africa that remixing is allowed, and no, it's just okay, you're allowed to do it. No, you're not. Actually, in Section 2.3 of our Act makes it very clear that if you want to make an adaptation of somebody else's work, you have to get permission. And the Act further goes on to recognize that if you don't get that permission, well, then you've got a partner that you never met. So it's like that in law. And, I know that Colin is giving the practical industry perspective, but I'm giving the legal perspective here. So to answer the gentleman's question on WhatsApp, yes, a remix is an adaptation. You've got to get permission. But to answer your question about a private copy levy, this is something we would very much like to see come into our law. It's happening in territories as close to our borders as Malawi and various African territories and throughout the world. And what it is a levy that is attached to the importation or manufacture of a device that can make copies of copyrighted work. And it would add 10 Rand or 15 Rand to the cost of your iPhone. And that 10 or 15 Rand would then go to the copyright holders in recognition of the fact that that device that you have bought can make copies. And I guess in a way, the private copy levy is kind of an acknowledgement that everybody infringes copyright a little bit here and there, whether it's just by using YouTube or by using a torrent site or simply making a copy or taking a CD and turning it into a digital copy on your iPad. The private copy levy would say, okay, we're acknowledging that. It's okay, it's private use, but we're going to pay those rights owners, and this is how we're going to find the money to pay them. And it's working very well in other territories in the world. This is one of the things that we'd like to see government bring into South Africa. And we think that now is the most opportune time, with AI also rearing its head as a very real thing in our industry. And perhaps the two can be entwined. We're not saying that there should be necessarily. Perhaps they should be seen as separate issues. But we'd like to see government regulation of AI platforms in the way that I've described. But we'd also like to see a private copy levy come in. That would be a very good move.
Yeah. And you made mention of the Copyright Act number 98 of 1978. It is old. 1978 was a long time ago. Colin, you're part of conversations around reform. Where are we with getting this act revisited, updated so that it can fit the current landscape?
Khumuz, it's a really unfortunate situation we found ourselves in South Africa, because we started this copyright reform process more than 10 years ago. The first copyright amendment bill was presented to Parliament about more or less 10 years ago, and it was then rejected by the President around 2019 because he raised certain issues around unconstitutionality with certain provisions of the bills, and then it was sent back to Parliament to be revised. Now, Parliament only dealt with one of those 6 reservations of the President, and the President was not happy again. He said, no, I'm not signing this bill, and then he sent it to the Constitutional Court. Now, we didn't know what AI was in 2015.
Yeah.
In fact, a lot of technology that is now available and being used, we've been overtaken by events during this period. And we're in a situation where the Constitutional Court has now delivered their judgment about 3 months ago. And we're waiting to see how the Department of Trade and Industry and Competition will now take that judgment on board and do the most reasonable and responsible thing, which is to take this bill back to the drawing board so that it is revised to be fit for purpose and to take into account this new technology such as AI, because the current bill in its form right now will enable piracy and AI to just go unabated.
Yeah.
So we really need to ensure that this bill that is currently sitting with the President is revised to take into account AI, because if we don't, we are in for some, we are really in trouble, because then you'll have fair use, which other countries have already declared that AI and machine learning cannot be allowed to be equated to fair use. And we've seen that last month in Munich, in Germany, where the regional court in Munich declared that it cannot be allowed. So we are literally in South Africa falling behind in terms of where the world is going in protecting intellectual property for creativity, for creatives, and we need a bill that is going to be adopted to be in line with the current reality that we face.
Here's a question, and perhaps, Nick, you want to take it. Someone's saying, hi, regarding the AI in music, who owns Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La, Ti, Do? Does AI not have the ability to learn rules of music to put together a sound? Then regarding the words, is the IP the words and the word sequence or the voice? If it's the former, who's the custodian of word sequences? Nick?
Yeah, well, it's a bit of a copyright lecture that the listener is asking me to give here, so I'll try and keep it short. But there is a difference between copyright infringement and simple influence or genre influence. You know, very many composers say, well, I'm influenced, for example, by Led Zeppelin, and so my music might sound a little bit like them, but don't sue me for copyright infringement. Well, the law has fairly strict parameters, and it says if it's substantially similar, then it is an infringement, provided you had prior access to that original work. But AI really is not that at all. AI is actively copying the ones and zeros that are created by humans. And right there is the infringement. So it's not okay to imply that AI is simply doing what other human composers have done before, which is just be influenced by their predecessors. It's not that. AI is copying and AI is using, and it's not paying for it. So it's a very different scenario, that. But having said that, I think that your listener would be comforted to know that very often in copyright infringement cases like this, the court will require one of the elements, which is substantial similarity, not to be as strong, where the other element being proof of prior access. In other words, you actually accessed my work, you went and used it, and I can prove that. Is stronger. So the court kind of does a balancing act, and hopefully gets it right more often than wrong. But of course, there have been incorrect copyright infringement cases. AI is absolutely not that. AI is using work clearly, and they admit it. In all the court cases, it's proven and admitted. They're using it, they're copying it, and they're not paying for it yet. So it's a different scenario, I think.
Gentlemen, I want to give you an opportunity to give a forecast of the way forward and how we're expecting to see, this space change, especially because these conversations are happening more and more. I understand there's also a symposium happening tomorrow, Colin, which you'll tell us about. But what can we expect in the music space currently with the conversations in relation to AI? You can go ahead, Colin.
Okay. Yes. That was for Nick. I think maybe let's just start from just quickly from a legislative framework. We definitely need the AI policy, which Minister Solly Malatsi has commissioned. We know that policy is long overdue, and we're hoping we can get some certainty around how will this new AI policy, national AI policy, going to protect intellectual property for rights holders. That is very critical. And also we need this copyright amendment bill to be revised ASAP. It is outdated. We've spoken about it today. 1978 copyright law needs to be adapted to what is really happening in this day and age. And then also for the music industry themselves, they need to disrupt themselves. In as much as you can wait for the laws to be updated, but you cannot wait for that, and they will not solve market dynamics. You need to create a licensing market for AI-produced works. So the industry themselves need to start to be more proactive and forward-thinking and find ways on how they can create that licensing market for themselves to future-proof the industry.
And then, Nick, I want to give you the final word.
Okay, thanks, Komotsa. First of all, I'd like to say to Colin, tomorrow is going to be a magnificent event. I'm really looking forward to it. I've written the whole day off, and I'm going to be there. I can't wait for it. Really, the work that Colin is doing in the industry is beyond admirable. So kudos to him. I would like to say that what Colin has said about government's involvement here is absolutely critical. The first thing that has to happen is the Copyright Amendment Bill needs to be completely reworked from scratch. And this time, government really needs to listen to the creative industries in general, which Colin is doing tomorrow. I should also state that, if I may, that there's an AI in Music conference happening on the 12th of November at the college where I lecture. And anybody who's particularly interested in AI as it pertains to the music industry particularly is welcome to come along to that. We're hoping that government will be in attendance, and not just the DTIC, but also Department of Sports, Arts and Culture, and perhaps Communications as well. And so we can have fireside chats there where government actually listens to the music industry, and of course tomorrow at Colin's event to the creative industries in general. I think if that happens, we'll be good, and AI could become the best thing that ever happened to the creative industries, as opposed to potentially the worst, which a lot of people think it might have been just not so long ago.
All right. Nick Matsuki is CEO and founder of the Academy of Sound Engineering, and Colin Dlamini, Executive Director at Creative Synergy. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Matsuo.
It's fun, it's fast, and it's fiery. The Spinner Zonke Jackpot Race is Mzansi's most exciting slots competition, boasting the richest rewards. With over 60 piping hot habanero games to choose from, you stand a chance to win your share of 3 million rand. Join the sprint to success and claim your slice of the prize. Play every Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday evenings from 8:30 to 10:30, and you could win big. T's and C's apply. Hollywood Sportsbook is a licensed betting operator. No persons under the age of 18 years are permitted to gamble. Winners know when to stop. South African Responsible Gambling Foundation toll-free counseling line 0800 006 008 or WhatsApp HELP to 076 675 0710.
Planning for retirement doesn't have to be overwhelming. Join PPS on 19 September for its annual retirement summit featuring award-winning speakers, authors, journalists, and financial experts. Whether you're under 45 and focused on wealth accumulation, over 45 and thinking about wealth preservation, there's a program for your life stage. Enjoy a meal and gain insights for financial future. 2 generations, 1 shared goal, greater financial freedom at only 150 Rand per person. Book now at pps.co.za/retirement summit. PPS, success is better, shared or better shared. PPS is a licensed life insurer, controlling company, and authorized FSP.
Need a new appliance? Upgrade with Checker 6060 and we'll deliver today. Monday morning, Nespresso's calling. Let's go 6060. Bad hair day, Dyson's on the way. Let's go 6060. Cleaning hour with Karcher Power. Let's go 6060. Newsmake toaster for the boaster. Let's go 6060. Shop our wide range of home, kitchen, and beauty appliances on Checker 6060 and get it delivered today. Let's go 6060.
I've had a great life. A wonderful time on beautiful earth. Sunsets I'll never forget. Coastlines I could have walked forever. Animals so extraordinary they didn't seem real. A world so beautiful it almost hurt. And now in my final chapter, I've come to know I can't choose when my story ends, but I can choose what it says. To the world that gave me everything, it seemed only right to leave it for others to love too. Make the last thing you do the greatest thing you do. Leave a legacy to WWF in your will.
Thank you so much for tuning in. This was 702 Afternoons. I am back tomorrow between 1 and 3 p.m. for the Thursday edition of